The party was in full swing, music loud, people smiling, but for me, that big, beautiful event hall felt less like a celebration and more like a courtroom. It was my granddaughter's wedding, you see, a day that, for all its sparkle and joy, ended up feeling like my judgment day. Right there at the entrance, a young woman, beaming, handed me a name badge. I took it, just like everyone else. But when my eyes fell on the words printed there, my blood ran cold. In big, happy, festive letters, it read, "Alice, the little old lady who pays for everything." I swear, my heart just stopped beating for a second. The music, the laughter, it all just faded into a distant hum. I could almost feel their gazes on me, the quiet, disguised snickers that followed. This was my granddaughter, Jennifer's, big day. A day that, quite frankly, only existed because of me. Every flower, every light, every single bite of that fancy catering, and this badge, this cruel little piece of paper was my tribute. It wasn't just a name tag. It was a sentence, etched in bold letters for everyone to see. In that very moment, standing right there in the middle of the party I had funded with my own two hands, with all my savings, I finally understood something profound and deeply painful. My value to them, my own family, wasn't in all the memories we had built together. It wasn't in the countless hours of love I had dedicated, the sleepless nights I'd worried, the endless support I'd offered. No, it was just the balance of my bank account. Nothing more, nothing less, just a number. This feeling of rejection, it settled deep in my bones. My son, Richard, was standing right there beside me. He saw the badge. I know he did. He saw my face, my shocked expression. But he just pretended not to notice. He looked straight ahead, probably thinking about the next toast or who he needed to chat with. For him, I suppose, it was just a harmless little joke, a bit of light-hearted fun. But for me, oh, for me, it was the final, crushing confirmation. It was the moment I truly became invisible. Not just a mother or a grandmother, but a mere provider. An endless ATM. That emotional coldness from him, it just made everything heavier. A profound silence fell over me that night. Not an outward silence, mind you. The hall was still buzzing. But inside, it was quiet. It wasn't a silence of consent. It wasn't the silence of weakness or defeat. No, not at all. It was the silence of someone who finally, clearly understands that some battles, the really important ones, aren't won with shouts or tears. They're won with a different kind of weapon. They're won with the right pen at the absolute right time. Beautiful, Benjamin. This quiet humiliation, this distance I felt from them, it was a turning point. They laughed, you see. They chuckled at that badge, probably thought it was the funniest thing. They had no idea. They couldn't possibly imagine that with that one casual, thoughtless gesture, they had just signed something far more significant than the wedding guest book. They had, in fact, just signed the end of the easy life I had provided for them for so very long. What they truly couldn't imagine, not in their wildest dreams, was that behind this little old lady who paid for everything, who seemed so quiet and harmless, there was still a woman who in that very moment was about to remind absolutely everyone who she truly was. And that, my dear friends, was a realization they were nowhere near ready for. My name is Alice. I'm 76 years old. I guess it's time you knew a little more about me, the little old lady from the badge. For 50 beautiful years, I was married to my Robert. Oh, Robert. He was a man with such vision and the biggest, kindest heart you could imagine. We weren't just building a family together, though that was our greatest joy. We were also building something else, bit by bit. A modest estate, really. Nothing fancy, but it was the fruit of so much hard work, so much saving. Our greatest pride, the thing that filled our hearts to bursting, was a beautiful event venue. We called it the Blossom Grove Estate. We planned it, dreamed about it, and then built it, brick by brick, with our own hands, sometimes with a little help from friends. We imagined our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, running across that green lawn, laughing, making memories. It wasn't just a business for us. It was a place for life to happen, a place for love. After Robert passed away, a piece of my heart went with him, of course. But I still had our family, our legacy. So I dedicated myself entirely to them, to my children, and especially to my grandchildren. My eldest son, Richard, and his wife, Pamela, they always knew they could count on me. For anything, really. And Jennifer, my granddaughter, the one who was getting married that night, she truly was the apple of my eye. I loved her so much. I never, ever said no to her. When she needed help with college tuition, I was there. When she needed her first car, I found a way. A down payment on her first apartment, of course. And then, for her dream wedding party? Well, you already know about that. I always saw it as an act of love, you see? A way to maintain the legacy of care that Robert and I always valued so deeply. We believed in family. We believed in supporting each other. That's just who we were, or who I thought we were. Robert, he was always so organized, so protective of me, even more so as we got older. I remember it clearly. Before he left me, before he passed, he handed me a simple, worn folder. It was thick with documents. He looked me right in the eye, his gaze so earnest, so full of love, and a hint of something else I couldn't quite place then. He said, "Alice, here is everything we built, every single piece of it. And there's something special in here too, a clause. It's there to ensure that no one ever, ever forgets your worth, to make sure no one ever tries to take advantage of you." At the time, I just cried, tears streaming down my face, thinking it was such an overreaction. Who would ever try to take advantage of me? My own family? It seemed impossible. I thought he was just being overly dramatic, too worried. I just hugged him tight and told him not to worry about such things. Today, though, oh, today I understand. He knew. He knew human nature better than I ever could. He saw things I was too naive, too full of love, to see. He always did. I truly thought my generosity was the greatest gift I could give them. My biggest offering of love. I really believed that. But I was about to discover, in the most painful way imaginable, that from my family, for the very people I poured my heart and soul into. That generosity wasn't a gift at all. It was merely my greatest weakness. And that knowledge, that creeping realization, it felt like a cold stone settling in my chest. The preparations for Jennifer's wedding, the very reason for the big party, they weren't just about planning a celebration for me. Oh no, they were the slow, painful beginning of my true awakening, a real, gut-wrenching realization of what had become of my family. Every single choice was the most expensive option, you see. No matter what it was, from the flowers to the food to the photographer. And every single request, big or small, always came wrapped in that same little phrase. "Oh, Grandma, it's my dream. Jennifer, my sweet granddaughter." She'd say it with such earnest eyes, and my heart, it just wanted to give her everything. Richard, my son, he was right there too, always backing her up. Whenever I'd try to gently suggest something a little simpler, maybe a bit more modest, but still beautiful, he'd just wave his hand. "Mom," he'd say, "you don't need to worry about the money. Jennifer deserves the best, always. The best." That word, it echoed in my head, a hollow sound. Because the best, as they defined it, never, ever included my opinion. It certainly never included my feelings. I was just the resource, the open wallet, the endless well. My wisdom, my experience, my very self, none of it mattered in these plans. It happened so gradually, I almost didn't notice it at first. Conversations that didn't involve money, or the wedding, or some new expense, they just disappeared. My visits to Richard and Pamela's house, they became quicker. Phone calls, they got shorter, more direct. Always a specific request, always about something they needed. A bill to pay, a deposit to make. I started to feel it deep down in my gut. I felt like an ATM, just a machine they came to when they needed cash. No feelings, no real connection, just transactions. It was a cold, lonely feeling, one I pushed away for a long time. But then there was Michael, my younger grandson, Richard and Pamela's son, Jennifer's brother. He's always been different, quiet, thoughtful. He has this spark in his eyes when he talks about art. That's all he cares about. That's what lights him up. One afternoon, he came to visit me, not to ask for money for something big, but just for help buying canvases and paints. He talked about colors, about light, about the way he wanted to capture the world. He spoke with such passion, such genuine joy. It was a sparkle I didn't see in Jennifer's eyes when she talked about her fancy designer wedding dress, or her expensive shoes, or the 10-tier cake. With Michael, I felt truly heard, truly seen, for the first time in ages. That little moment with Michael, it was a tiny flicker of warmth in a growing chill. The true turning point, though, the last straw before the wedding party itself, came just days before. I was at Richard's house, supposedly helping with some last-minute details. I walked past the kitchen and the door was ajar. I heard voices. Pamela, Richard's wife, my daughter-in-law, was talking to Jennifer, my granddaughter. They didn't know I was there, of course. Pamela's voice was low, but clear, and I heard her say it, plain as day. "Go ahead and ask, dear. Your grandmother is obligated to give. That's what she lives for." Just like that, my breath caught in my throat. Obligated? What I live for? It hit me like a physical blow. All the little doubts, the creeping suspicions, they crashed down on me in that instant. In that moment, the penny dropped. The whole picture, it just clicked into place. There wasn't any gratitude, not really, just a profound, chilling sense of entitlement. A duty, my duty to them. They didn't see a loving mother. They didn't see a devoted grandmother. Not anymore. They saw an inexhaustible source of funds, a fountain of money that existed solely to serve them, to fulfill their wants, their dreams, their every expensive whim. I was just a function, a wallet with a pulse. And the worst part, they were so incredibly busy, so preoccupied, you see, with planning how to spend my money, so focused on their grand schemes and lavish desires. They didn't even notice. They didn't notice that I was quietly, steadily, beginning to plan something of my own, something entirely different. I was starting to plan how to reclaim my dignity. The wedding party, Jennifer's big day, it all happened right there, at our own Blossom Grove estate. The place was truly stunning, just as Jennifer had always dreamed. Every detail perfect, every flower in place, every light twinkling just so. And of course, just as I had paid for. But the beauty of the venue, the very place Robert and I had built with such love and hope, it only made my humiliation, that raw feeling in my gut, even more bitter. It twisted something inside me. After that infamous badge was pinned to my chest, the one that screamed my financial role, I walked through the main hall. It felt like walking through a gauntlet. I could feel the pitying glances, the whispers that followed me. They weren't loud, but I knew. I saw Richard, my own son, introduce me to a guest. He pointed right to my chest, to that badge, and then he laughed. "This is my mother," he said, loud enough for me to hear. The official sponsor of the night. His words, that laugh, they echoed in the grand hall. They echoed in my heart. No one, not a single soul, asked me how I was. Not even a simple, "How are you, Alice?" No one offered me a glass of water, not after my long journey there. I wasn't a guest, not really. I wasn't even family in the way that truly mattered. I was just a decorative figure, you see. A silent symbol of their financial power, their success. A prop in their perfect picture. I found a distant table, tucked away in a corner, and I sat there. I just watched. I observed the manufactured joy, the forced smiles, the loud toasts. I watched Jennifer and her new husband raising their glasses, beaming for the cameras. I watched Richard making grand speeches about family, about unity, about all the wonderful things they had. And Pamela, his wife, she was there too, showing off her new jewelry, glinting under the sparkling lights. They were all so vibrant, so full of themselves, so full of the moment. And I was there, Alice, the matriarch, the founder of that very place, the Blossom Grove estate, that was now bustling with their joy, and yet I was treated like a stranger, like a background character, a mere joke, there for their amusement, their convenience. It was like I had vanished, right there in the middle of everything. The pain, it was silent. It was deep. It wasn't a shout, not an outburst that anyone could hear. No, it was something far more profound. It was a crack, a slow, agonizing fracture in my very soul. It was then, watching them, smiling, laughing, celebrating on my dime, that I finally realized. The love I had poured into them, the endless giving, it was a one-way street, a dead end for me. They didn't love me, not Alice, the woman, the mother, the grandmother. No, they loved what I could provide for them. They loved my money. They loved my resources. In that grand hall, the one Robert and I had built with the sweat of our lives, with our shared dreams and hard-earned savings, they systematically stripped me of everything: my dignity, my worth, my identity as a person, everything, that is, but my money. And right there, in that quiet corner, amidst the laughter and the music, in the heavy silence of my own heart, I made a decision, a very quiet, very firm decision. My money, that would be the last thing they would ever get from me. They were so caught up in their celebration, so blind in their entitlement, they forgot. They completely forgot that the one who pays for the party isn't always the one who serves the banquet. Sometimes, just sometimes, they're the one who signs the final bill. The party ended, the guests dispersed, and I was left alone in the grand, now quiet hall. The next day was Sunday, and I just moved through it in a daze, a quiet ache in my chest. But Monday morning, something shifted. That quiet ache transformed into a steady, unshakable resolve. There was no complaint in me, no urge to cry on the phone with Richard, to scream about the badge or the humiliation. That wasn't my way, not anymore. My pain, it had become something else entirely. It had become my purpose. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Martin's number. Martin, Robert's trusted lawyer for decades. He was a quiet man, sharp as a tack, and with a memory like an elephant. Robert had always relied on him for everything important, and so had I. Whenever I needed advice about the house or minor legal things. But this was different. My voice, when I spoke to him, was calm, steadier than I felt inside. I scheduled an urgent meeting, as urgent as one could be for a 76-year-old woman. A few hours later, I was sitting across from him in his office. It was a place steeped in memories, a bit dusty, with stacks of old files and the faint scent of old paper and leather. I had been there so many times with Robert, making plans, signing papers, always together. Today, I was alone, facing a very estate that Robert and I had built, that was sacred to us. Martin listened. He didn't interrupt. He just sat there, his gaze unwavering, occasionally nodding. After I finished, he let out a long, quiet sigh. It wasn't a sigh of exasperation, but one of understanding, almost of sorrow. He then reached over to a heavy old filing cabinet by his desk. He pulled open a drawer, searched for a moment, and then retrieved a familiar, worn folder. The very same one Robert had given me that day before he passed. He opened it carefully, almost reverently. He pushed it across the desk toward me, sliding a few stapled pages to the top. "Alice," he said, his voice soft. "Robert, in his wisdom, foresaw much. He insisted on including a very specific clause in his will, and it was also written into the deed of the Blossom Grove estate." He pointed to a paragraph on the page. I leaned closer, my eyes scanning the legal jargon. But Martin, ever helpful, knew I might not grasp it all. "The clause is clear, Alice," he explained patiently. "The estate, Blossom Grove, is yours for lifelong use and enjoyment." That's always been straightforward. But Robert added this: "If you were ever publicly disrespected or humiliated by a direct heir, Richard, Jennifer, or Michael, for instance, and if that disrespect happened on the premises of the Blossom Grove estate, you would then have the immediate and unequivocal power to alter the fate of the property in your own will. And not just alter it, but specifically to exclude the offender." So this was it. This was Robert's special protection. He had known. He had always known human nature, and he had loved me fiercely enough to prepare for this exact kind of betrayal. That day, sitting there in Martin's dusty office, I didn't ask him to disinherit anyone right then and there. Not out of anger, not out of spite. That wasn't my motivation. My motivation was different now. The pain, the humiliation, it hadn't turned me bitter. It had given me something far more valuable: clarity, a painful, undeniable clarity about where I stood and where they stood. "Martin," I said, my voice still calm, "I need you to draft a new will for me, one that reflects this new understanding." He nodded, already pulling out new forms, his pen poised. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He understood. I watched him work, the scratching of his pen the only sound in the room for a long while. When he was done, he presented the document. I read it, carefully, every word. It wasn't a document born of fury, but of the quiet, firm resolve that only comes from deep pain transformed into self-respect. I signed it. My hand was steady, surprisingly so. And as the ink dried on the paper, I felt a weight, an immense, crushing weight, lift from my shoulders. It wasn't vengeance I felt. It was a profound sense of reorganization. It was the quiet reclaiming of the control I had so freely given away out of love, and was now taking back, out of an absolute necessity for self-respect. They, my family, they had probably thought my silence that night at the wedding, my quiet withdrawal, was submission. They probably thought I was old, frail, and would just accept it. But they were so wrong. What they didn't realize, what they couldn't hear, was that my silence wasn't weakness at all. It was the powerful, undeniable sound of my entire future being rewritten. In ink and in truth. My silence, that powerful, undeniable sound of my future being rewritten in ink and in truth, immediately led to my first real action. I decided it was time to turn off the tap. You see, the money tap, the one they had grown so accustomed to, the one they believed would flow forever. It was only a week after the wedding, a quiet week for me, full of silent planning. My phone rang. It was Richard, my son. His voice was bright, full of an excitement I hadn't heard in ages. He launched straight into it, talking about an unmissable investment opportunity. He said it needed a quick contribution from me, just a little something to get it off the ground, to secure his future. It was the same old song, just a different tune. But this time, I wasn't listening to the music. With a calm that surprised even me, I simply said, "No, my son, not this time." The silence on the other end of the line was immediate. It was thick, heavy. I could almost hear his mind trying to process what I had said, how I had said it. Then, the dam broke. It was an explosion, an absolute torrent of anger and accusations. I was selfish, he yelled. Ungrateful, after everything he had done. He even told me I was going senile, that I didn't understand what was good for me anymore. He painted a picture of me, an old woman losing her mind, unable to make good decisions. It was cruel, but I expected it. I just listened, quietly. There was no rage in me, no fear, just a deep, quiet understanding. The weeks that followed were a desert of affection, a dry, empty stretch of time. Pamela, my daughter-in-law, and Jennifer, my granddaughter, they stopped visiting. Completely. The phone calls, which had always been so direct, so transactional, they ceased. Not even a quick hello, a check-in, just silence. The house felt bigger, emptier. Loneliness, that familiar, unwelcome guest. It did knock on my door. I heard it. But this time, I didn't let it in. Not anymore. This time, I had a plan. I had a purpose. I decided to fill my time, to fill my life with the things I had abandoned, the things I truly loved, the things that made me, Alice, feel alive. I went back to painting my watercolors, the quiet splash of the brush on paper, the way the colors bloomed and blended. It was like therapy. It was a language I hadn't spoken in years. I reconnected with the ladies from my embroidery group. We sat, stitching our patterns, sipping tea, sharing stories and laughter. Simple joys, but they felt like treasures. And then there was Michael, my younger grandson. He still came to visit. Quietly, thoughtfully. He still asked for my help, but not for money this time. He just wanted my eyes on his work, my opinion as he put together his portfolio for art college. We'd sit for hours, talking about art, about life, about dreams. Every brushstroke I made, every cup of coffee shared with a friend, every moment helping Michael, it felt like an act of silent rebellion, a quiet defiance against the emptiness they had created. But they weren't done with me. The pressure, it started to increase. They couldn't understand why the tap had suddenly run dry, why I wasn't bending to their will. One afternoon, Richard and Pamela showed up at my house, unannounced. No call, no warning. They just appeared on my doorstep, looking grim, but with that familiar, forced concern plastered on their faces. They walked in, sat me down, and began a conversation. It was rehearsed, clearly. Every word seemed chosen, every pause timed. They talked about how I wasn't doing well, how I seemed frail, how I needed care. They said it would be so much better for me if they managed my affairs. I just sat there, listening. My heart was calm. I looked at their faces, their earnest expressions, and I understood completely. The veiled suggestion was chillingly clear. They wanted to have me declared incompetent. They wanted to take control of everything that remained. My finances, my property, my very life. They wanted to strip me of everything, legally this time. It was the final push, the absolute last thing I needed to understand, that they would stop at nothing. They had no limits, no shame. They truly believed I was a frail, helpless old woman, easy prey. They thought they had me cornered, that they had won. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that they had already walked right into my trap. They were already caught. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that they had already walked right into my trap. They were already caught. The very next morning, I picked up the phone again, not to call Richard, not to explain anything. This time, I called him. I scheduled a family meeting, and I chose the location with purpose. It was at the Blossom Grove estate, the very same place of my public humiliation, the place where I had been stripped of everything but my money. I wanted them to come back to the scene of their crime, so to speak. Richard, Pamela, and Jennifer arrived promptly. They came with forced smiles, tight around the edges, like masks they had practiced putting on. I could see it in their eyes. They thought I had finally given in to the pressure. They believed I was broken, that I was ready to surrender. They probably imagined I would apologize or beg them to come back into my life, maybe even offer them more money to smooth things over. They walked into the main hall, the place where Jennifer's wedding had been just weeks before, ready to dictate the rules of my care. They had already planned how they would manage my life, my health, my money. They were so sure of themselves, so very sure. Little did they know, I wasn't alone. Martin, my trusted lawyer, was already there. He was waiting for me, seated at one of the long, polished tables, a folder of documents neatly arranged in front of him. He gave me a small, reassuring nod as I walked in. I felt a quiet strength gather in my chest, a strength I hadn't felt in years. Richard, ever the one to take charge, began to speak almost immediately. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, looking very serious. He started with a long, drawn-out speech about the necessity for them to assume the management of the estate and all my assets. He spoke of my advancing age, my fragility, his deep concern for my well-being. It was all a carefully constructed lie, all meant to convince me, and more importantly, to justify their greed. But before he could go much further, before he could spin his web of deception any tighter, I simply interrupted him with a gesture, a small, simple wave of my hand. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth slightly agape, surprised. I looked him directly in the eye. With a firm voice, a voice that felt strong and clear, a voice I hadn't used in years, I said, "Thank you for your concern, my son. Truly. But today, the only thing that will be decided here is the future of this place." Then, I turned my gaze to Martin. He understood. Without a word, he opened the folder in front of him. He reached inside and placed several items on the table. First, the original deed to the Blossom Grove estate. Then, a copy of Robert's will. And finally, almost as an afterthought, he placed a small laminated photograph right on top. The photo of the name badge I had worn at Jennifer's wedding. The one that read, "Alice, the little old lady who pays for everything." I had kept it, you see. A quiet reminder. A powerful piece of evidence. A hush fell over the room. Richard, Pamela, and Jennifer exchanged confused glances. They looked at the documents, then at the badge, then back at me. Martin then began to speak, his voice calm, professional, and utterly unshakable. He read the protective clause aloud, every single word. He explained it clearly and precisely. He made it perfectly clear that the badge, their little joke, wasn't just a harmless bit of fun. Oh no, it was the activation of a legal consequence. He explained, patiently, that the public disrespect and humiliation inflicted right here on the premises of the Blossom Grove estate had given me the immediate and unequivocal power to alter the destiny of this very property in my own will. And then I took the final step. I reached over, and with a quiet movement, I showed them my new will. I pushed it across the table, toward them. They stared at it, uncomprehending at first. Martin explained the contents. He told them in no uncertain terms that the Blossom Grove estate, the family's most valuable asset, the place they had always assumed would one day be theirs, would now be entirely allocated to fund Michael's studies. All of it, and any remainder, any other part of it, would be transformed into an art foundation in Michael's name. A place for true talent and passion to blossom, just like our grove. The color drained from Richard's face. He went pale, as if all the blood had left his body. Pamela was speechless, her jaw slack. Jennifer just stared, her eyes wide, unblinking. It was as if they had been struck by lightning. The shock was absolute. Justice, I realized in that moment, didn't come with shouts. It didn't come with tears or arguments or desperate pleas. It came with the calm, irrefutable reading of a document. A piece of paper, signed in silence, that held more power than all their greed combined. That day, in the hall of the estate they coveted, they didn't just lose an inheritance. They lost the mother and the grandmother they thought they could control forever. After that meeting, a profound silence settled between me and Richard's side of the family. The air just went still. No more calls, no more unannounced visits, no more demands. For the first time in a very long time, though, that silence didn't bring me pain. It brought me peace. A deep, quiet peace that hummed in my bones. It was a kind of freedom, really, from all the noise and the expectation. I thought about selling the Blossom Grove estate for a while. It was just so much to manage, and I had already dealt with so much heartache there. But then an idea started to bloom, right there in the quiet of my new life. It was a place Robert and I had built with so much love. It shouldn't be defined by one painful day. and Michael, my wonderful grandson. He overflowed with ideas. He's the one who truly sees the beauty in things, the potential. So, I decided not to sell it. We are transforming the space, piece by piece, giving it a new breath, a new soul. Part of it will become a gallery for new artists, a place for young, passionate talents like Michael to show their work. The main hall, that grand space where Jennifer's wedding happened, it will still host events, yes, but now it will have a different soul, a purpose that isn't just about money, but about art and creativity and community. It feels right. It feels like what Robert would have wanted. My routine changed completely, drastically even. Mornings are no longer spent waiting for a phone call that won't come, a request for money, or some imagined family gathering. Instead, I walk in the garden. I tend to my rose bushes, feeling the dew on my hands, the soft petals against my fingertips. I watch the sunrise, listen to the birds. It's a simple pleasure, but it fills me with such quiet joy. Afternoons are for painting, truly. I bring out my watercolors, and often Michael is by my side, each of us with our own canvas, our own world of color. We don't talk much sometimes, but we exchange ideas, a laugh here and there. It's a shared language, unspoken and beautiful. I started reaching out. I reconnected with distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, friends from my old embroidery group, whom life had pulled away. It turns out my family wasn't as small as I thought. I was just looking at the wrong people in the wrong places for so long. There was so much warmth, so much genuine affection waiting for me. I just needed to open my eyes and my heart to it. I don't live a life of luxury now, not in the way they understood it, not with lavish spending and endless demands. But I live a life of meaning, and that, I've learned, is true wealth. It isn't in the bank, or in fancy cars, or designer dresses. It's in the dignity with which we live, in the respect we command, not demand. I feel no anger now, not anymore. Just a serene relief, a quiet joy for having rescued the Alice Robert loved so much. This strong woman who knows her worth and won't let anyone diminish it. The house is quieter, yes. The silence from one part of my family is still there. But my life, oh, my life has never been so full of life, of color, and most of all, so full of myself. The house is quieter, yes. The silence from one part of my family is still there, and it still makes the rooms feel bigger, emptier sometimes. But the peace it brought me, a deep, quiet peace that hums in my bones, it's a profound kind of quiet. A quiet that made me think, really think, about everything that happened. Not just for me, but for so many others. My story, this journey of mine, it might seem unique, something that only happens to one person in a blue moon. But I've come to realize, truly realize, that the kind of pain I felt, the sting of that deep injustice and betrayal, is known by so many people out there. It's the pain of giving your very best, of pouring your heart and soul into people, into relationships, into your family, of offering all your love, your time, your resources, your very self. And then, one day, you wake up and you realize that for the people you love most, the ones who should cherish you above all else, you've somehow, almost imperceptibly, become just a convenience, a means to an end. Not a person, not Alice, the mother, the grandmother, the woman, just a function. A label, like the little old lady who pays for everything. Just a role, not a soul. It's a cold, hard truth to face, isn't it? To know that your identity has been reduced to your utility. How many times in our lives do we quietly, slowly, nullify ourselves? Do we dim our own light, shrink our own spirit, just to fit into someone else's plans? To be what they want us to be, to provide what they expect, to avoid rocking the boat, to keep the peace? How often do we let our deepest love, our most genuine generosity, get mistaken? Mistaken for an obligation they're entitled to, something they simply deserve. Mistaken for a weakness they can exploit, a limitless well they can draw from without thought or appreciation. It's a bitter pill to swallow, this realization, because it challenges everything you thought you knew about love and family. It took a public humiliation for me, a name badge, a public spectacle, right there at my granddaughter's wedding, in the place Robert and I had built with so much hope and sacrifice. It was raw. It was painful. It stripped me bare. But in a strange, almost cruel way, it was a gift. It was the jolt I needed. It woke me up. It pushed me to take back the reins of my own life, to honor myself finally, to recognize my own worth that I had let others diminish, and in doing so, to honor the memory of Robert, my dear Robert, who always, always wanted to protect me, who saw this coming even when I couldn't bear to imagine it. He knew, and his love, even from beyond, gave me the courage. So I find myself thinking about all of you, listening to me now. And I have to ask you, truly, from my heart, have you ever felt it? That chilling sensation of being invisible in the eyes of those who should see your soul most clearly? The ones who should know every inch of your heart, every sacrifice you've made, every tear you shed. Have you ever felt that awful, heavy weight of realizing your worth was being measured not by simply who you are, the unique, invaluable person you are, but by what you could offer, by what you could do for them, by your capacity to provide, to solve problems, to pay bills? It's a lonely place to be, to feel like a function rather than a beloved human being. And it's a feeling that should never, ever be endured alone. And it's a feeling that should never, ever be endured alone. That is precisely why I decided to share my story with you. It wasn't easy peeling back those layers, reliving the moments of pain and humiliation. But in the telling, in the hope that someone else out there might hear a whisper of their own truth in my words, I find a different kind of healing, a quiet, profound peace. Because the isolation I felt when I realized I was just a function to my family, an ATM, rather than a beloved mother or grandmother. That was a truly desolate place. It was a silence that echoed with loneliness, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But now, my life is different. It's filled with genuine connections, with the quiet beauty of my art, with the warmth of true friendship, and the quiet joy of guiding Michael, who sees with his heart. I found my voice again, not in shouts or anger, but in the calm certainty of knowing who I am and what I deserve. And part of that newfound strength comes from sharing, from reaching out. Because when we share our stories, when we speak our truths, we don't just process our own pain. We create a space for others to feel seen, to feel understood. We remind each other that we are not alone in our struggles, in our quiet battles against invisibility or exploitation. It's a precious thing, this connection we formed, this understanding that bridges the space between us. It's a testament to the fact that even after moments of profound disrespect, dignity can be reclaimed, and new paths filled with meaning and purpose can be forged. My home might be quieter in one sense, but my life, my heart, it has never resonated with such fullness and authenticity. I walk in my garden now, breathing in the scent of my roses, and I feel a profound serenity, a knowing that I honored Robert's legacy, not just through what we built, but through how I chose to live, truly live, in his memory. And it's this, they can fray. I've learned how easily things can be disconnected, how quickly we can lose touch with what truly matters, even on something as simple as a screen. So, if you want to continue receiving real stories like this one, if you want to keep this little space of ours, this conversation, this quiet bond alive, please pay close attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. It's a strange thing, a technicality, but it happens. And I would truly hate for you to miss out on the next story, the next moment of shared understanding. So just take a moment, a quick second, and confirm you're still subscribed to the channel. And if you could, if it feels right to you, activate that little bell too. That way, these stories, these whispers of truth and resilience, can keep finding their way to you, no matter what. And we can all keep finding each other in this big, sometimes lonely world. Because no one, truly no one, should ever have to feel invisible or endure.